California recently passed the Tenant Protection Act of 2019, which became effective on January 1st of 2020, making rent control the law of the land throughout the state of California. There are exemptions under the law, which I will go into in this video, but even if a property is exempt under the law, the burden is still on the landlord to take proactive measures to protect their rights to make sure that they are in fact exempt under the law. In this video today, I'm going to go over the major points of this law, and I'll also discuss what landlords need to do if they are in fact exempt under the law to protect their rights. The Tenant Protection Act of 2019 provides limitations on how much money a landlord can raise their rent by every year, or at least in terms of percentage. And it also prohibits an owner, with certain exceptions, from terminating a lease without just cause, as that term is defined in the law. The annual rent cap is set at 5% plus inflation for that particular city. For example, if your local city has a local inflation rate of 2%, well then the maximum rent increase that you can do that year will be 7%. It would be 5% plus the 2% inflation rate. Now, irregardless of the city's inflation rate, the rent can never be raised more than 10% per year. That is the overall cap, regardless of what the inflation rate is. So the permitted increases are between 5% and 10%, and they cannot exceed 10%, and it cannot exceed 5% plus the inflation rate for that particular metropolitan area. Now, the rate of inflation is tied to the consumer price index for each metropolitan area, which is typically between 2 and 3% per year. Now, this law does not override local rent control laws. So those laws will still be in effect. For example, the city of Los Angeles, city of Santa Monica, and a number of cities throughout the state have their own rent control laws, which this law does not override. Overall, this law applies to apartment buildings and to multifamily buildings containing 2 or more units. So it exempts single-family homes, condos, townhomes, provided, of course, that that property is not owned by a corporation, a real estate investment trust, or a limited liability company where one member is a corporation. It also exempts duplexes where one of the units is owner-occupied. Now, even if the property is exempt under the law, the burden, though, is still on the owner of that property to send an exemption notice to their tenant, or else they may be subject to this law. It also exempts properties that are built within the past 15 years. It does not apply to vacant units, but once they become tenant occupied, the law is going to apply. Now, the law prohibits evictions without just cause. There are 2 types of just cause as defined under the law. There's what's called an at-fault just cause and a no-fault just cause. An at-fault just cause is where the tenant has failed to pay rent, or maybe there's criminal activity, or there's been a breach of a material term in the lease agreement by the tenant. A no-fault just cause is where perhaps the owner wants to move into the property, or they want to have a family member move into the property, or they're going to be withdrawing it from the rental market. It also includes if the owner is going to demolish the property or do a substantial remodel to the property. Now, these are, right now, it will eventually be subject to judicial interpretation as to what some of these terms mean. So, for example, withdrawing a property from the rental market, it's going to be interesting to see how the courts determine what is considered withdrawing a property from the rental market. But right now, this is the law as it's written. Now, as I mentioned before, if you are an owner of a property and the property is exempt under the law, the burden is on the owner to send an exemption notice to their tenant. So if you would like additional information on this law, or if you would like a copy of the notice to give to the tenants for exempt properties, letting them know that the property is exempt and not subject to rent control, feel free to reach out to me. You can give our office a call at 1-800-309-1528. I'm Tim Majka with Imagine Realty, a boutique real estate team with Keller Williams Realty, serving the greater Los Angeles, Long Beach, and Orange County area. Thank you so much for tuning in, and make it a great day.